when his mother Mary had been engaged to Joseph, but before they lived together, she was found to be with child from the Holy Spirit. Her husband Joseph, being a righteous man and unwilling to expose her to public disgrace, planned to dismiss her quietly. But just when he had resolved to do this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, "Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you are to name him Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins." And as I myself have been reflecting on those 3 short verses, there are a number of questions that came to mind that I would like you all to entertain with me for a second. For a moment, if we can try and put ourselves in this situation, how might Joseph have felt before he knew that this child was to be Jesus? How would he have felt? And I actually am going to ask for some audience participation here. What are some words or phrases or ideas that people think Joseph might have been feeling? Betrayed. Confused. Sad. Scared. Probably angry, yeah. I could imagine that he would feel angry, yeah. Ashamed. Thank you. Those are great responses, and those are the exact words that were coming to my mind as well. To find out that the woman that you were to marry was pregnant, and you know it's not yours, what is the natural, logical conclusion to that? I can guarantee you that my first thought would not be the Holy Spirit. Right? I mean, that's just, I'm sorry, we all live in the real world. That would not be what any of us would think, right? Now, Joseph, the text, and the writer of Matthew wants to be very clear about this, is that Joseph, being a righteous man, wanting to do what is right, wanting to do the correct thing in this situation, very difficult situation for sure, did not want to take the low road. You see, in this time and in this place, if Joseph told everyone, it was almost certain that Mary would be stoned to death. Joseph, in his righteousness, decided on a different course of action. He did not want that from Mary. And so he planned, as it says in the text, to dismiss her quietly. And yet another question comes to mind. Did Joseph come to this conclusion all by himself? Or did he talk things through with Mary? Did he have friends or family that he felt like he could talk to or explain? We don't know. The text certainly isn't clear about that. But I would imagine that there probably were some very long, difficult nights. I would imagine that there probably were some very challenging conversations that he had either with Mary or with people he trusted. I would imagine that would be the case. I know certainly if I were in that position, I would want that. And after talking with people or thinking things through himself, again, we're not sure what happened exactly, but he decided that he was going to dismiss her quietly. And there's a word that gets used in English, which I really love here. And it says, but just when he had resolved to do this. Just when he had resolved to do this. And I'm going to hit you with a Webster's dictionary definition. Sorry. The word resolute means to decide firmly on a course of action. So if we were to replace that in there, it would say, but just when Joseph had decided firmly on this course of action, what happens? Well, he falls asleep. At some point, he goes to bed. Everybody sleeps, even Joseph. He goes to sleep, and an angel appears to him in the dream and says, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you are to name him Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. Now again, I want you to entertain this thought with me for a moment. Imagine how you might feel waking up. What are the emotions running through your mind? You're probably still confused. You're also probably thinking, whoa, there is something happening here that I had no idea was going on. There is something about this that is special and good, and I was wrong. Now, when I read that, it very much echoes back to me some themes that we find in the Old Testament, all over the place. See, the writer of Matthew was very concerned about making sure that the Jewish audience that he was talking to really resonated and connected with this story. And as I read through this story, one of the stories that immediately pops out to me is the story of Jacob in Genesis 28. See, after stealing his brother's birthright, he gets out of Dodge, he leaves, he runs away, and he finds himself in a cave. And guess what Jacob does? I'll give you a hint, Joseph does it too. He fell asleep in the cave. And also, like Joseph, an angel, or it says actually a multitude of angels appeared to him. And as he woke up, one of the first things that he says is, surely the Lord is in this place and I did not know it. And I can imagine that Joseph must be thinking something very similar. Surely the Lord is in this, and I did not know it. Now, how often in life do we feel like we are walking through asleep? Let's see a show of hands. We're walking through, and sometimes we just feel asleep. Like we just don't have all the information. We're just doing our best. Maybe sometimes we're not doing our best. But we're trying to get through. We're doing the best that we can, but man, we're asleep. But then how many of us also, in those times of when we feel like we have been asleep, are visited by an angel, a new experience happens, We learn some new information, and then what happens? We wake up, don't we? We wake up. And what happens when we wake up? Do we see and do things the same way that we did when we were asleep? I'd be willing to bet that most of us would very strongly say, no, that's not what happened. We can do the best that we can using our logic, our reasoning, our faith, and our experiences, and we should absolutely rely on those things. And yet, we also must remember that we do not know what we do not know. There is always something, there's always a part of the picture that we maybe just don't fully understand or we don't fully get it. And we can spend weeks, sometimes months, deliberating and thinking through the best way to move forward through something, or how do I respond to this, or what do I believe, or how should I believe? And we come to the best conclusion that we can given the information that we have at the time. And yet, even in those moments, even when we are absolutely doing our absolute best, if we're missing a vital piece of information that we aren't aware of, how much our decision could be different if we knew. Sometimes we are able to know what those things are. Sometimes they're subtle hints, they're subtle things. Sometimes it's an angel appearing to you in a dream. So let's reflect again back on Joseph. Joseph wakes up. And when he wakes up, there's a few things that Joseph could have done. Joseph could have thought to himself, this is crazy, I'm out. Joseph could have thought, that was a weird dream. Joseph could have thought, okay, maybe this is true, maybe this isn't. I had tacos last night. I don't know, right? But what does Joseph do? He wakes up, and in light of the new information that the angel gives him, he resolutely changes course. Joseph took in that new information. Joseph allowed that experience to change him in a way that was so significant, so unbelievably countercultural, so unbelievably guided by hope and faith, that he continues on with Mary. And we know the rest of the story. Pretty incredible. It is amazing. And one final thing I'd like to point out before I conclude our time together is that, as Pastor Brian has also mentioned, I think, pretty much every Sunday, is that when these angels appear, what's the one thing in common that they always say? Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Sometimes our whole lives can get flipped upside down by something new, by something we never would have expected, by something that we realized we were wrong about, or our thinking was incorrect about. It's easy to become afraid and to feel anxious when we don't know what is to come, when we don't know how sometimes even to process some of the new information that we receive. And yet, every single time that the angels appear and reveal some pretty crazy stuff to people who were not expecting it, they rightly say, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. So together, let us walk with this new understanding, or maybe this new reminder, that even when we make the right choices, even when we go with the most logical way of thinking, even when we make the absolute best decisions that we can come to with any given set of information, let us not forget that we do not know all there is to know. We have not experienced all there is to experience. And instead, I want to challenge each of us. Let's allow room for angels, literally, figuratively, and everything in between, to wake us from our misunderstandings and to not be afraid in changing course, just as Joseph did. Peace be to God. Amen.